We are live. First, I want to thank everybody for being here and watching our show. I wanted to say this evening, but it's this evening and this very early morning for one of our guests, and semi-early morning for another one of our guests. Today, we are going to have a very special subject that we're going to talk about with two very special guests that will share with us a lot of their knowledge around it. We are going to talk about the present and the future of the pharmaceutical industry. And first, let me introduce my guests. We have Nagesh Yadav. He's a director, digital transformation and innovation life sciences at Stefanini North America. He's a very cool guy. We work a lot of projects with him, and he's the go-to guy when we want to talk about the pharma industry. Welcome, Nagesh.
Hi. Good evening, good afternoon, everyone. Good morning.
We also have Avik Pal. Avik is the CEO and founder of CleanOps, which is a very interesting company and partner that we work with. Avik has a technical background from Silicon Valley. He also developed a data interest, and he's looked a lot into this area as well. And he became an entrepreneur supporting global clinical trials. He will talk about this more during the discussion. Welcome, Avik.
Thank you, Alex. Pleasure to be here.
Gentlemen, just for me to make a quick introduction, as you know very well, pharma was one of the slowest industries to digitalize. Like the slowest. We always had to convince them about anything. We always had to say that, guys, you really need to do this and that, and we put a lot of effort into it and so forth. And basically, on one hand, now the entire world, every one of us is looking at the pharma industries to come up with a solution for the problem we are all facing, right? I mean, our hopes are with the pharma industry, and this is on one side. On the other side, the industry itself, like every other businesses on this planet, had to pivot, had to readapt, had to find new ways of staying alive. And you see now they have a double challenge, if you will, to put it this way. And this means that all the pharmaceutical leaders put a lot of focus lately on making their operations more agile, more transparent, more adaptive, from I don't know, mapping out and reinventing the supply chains, mixing them up with technology, looking at the distribution channels, at the sales strategies, how they integrate the sales rep into the whole context, because a lot of the pharma companies relied on sales reps, right? What do you do when you have to keep everybody at home? How do you interact with the potential market? Also, marketing strategies, shaping the workforce of the future, and many other things. So basically, all of the sudden, a very slow and traditional industry had to reinvent itself, not to readapt, but to become adaptive, which is like the biggest challenge for any business whatsoever. To go into the subject, I would like to ask the first question towards Nagesh. And the question is, Nagesh, what are the top three impacts you see in the pharma industry because of the current pandemic? Did the current situation impact the pharma companies' agility and transparency positively or not? What do you think?
Great question, Alex. There's a huge impact on pharma industry with this COVID-19 crisis. You'll see impact on the workforce and operations across functions due to lockdown and travel restrictions. Other significantly impacted function is the clinical R&D function. For clinical trials, you need hospitals, sites, and then you need patients to conduct trials. And due to these travel restrictions, patients are not available. Sites have been occupied with COVID patients. So other trials have been gone on hold, like more than 70 to 80% of trials have gone on hold. And the third one significantly impacted function is manufacturing and supply chain, because most of the largest markets of pharma consumption were Europe and US, and more than their APIs were imported from developing countries, and like China and India, South America, they have been significantly impacted with COVID. So the three key functions impacted: the workforce itself, the trials, and manufacturing and supply chain. And the speed and agility has reduced. Companies are trying to now gain agility with new digital, modern automation products, AI, machine learning, and going with more digital transformation. They're trying to get more 360 view across their functions through analytics, optimizing the trials, optimizing supply chains.
So basically, now they are learning about each of these new technologies and also learning how to integrate them in solutions as well. So they have to kind of do double the work, right?
Absolutely, yes. Pharma industry is typically late adopter of digital and latest technologies, but with now disruption, they are on compulsion to adopt this latest digital technologies, and the regulatory authorities as well have been very complementing to let pharma companies leverage these latest tools and technologies.
Okay, thank you very much, Nagesh. Avik, since we are talking about digital transformation and helping pharmaceutical companies, I want to ask you, how did you decide to start CleanOps? And also, what is the biggest impact your company brings in the pharma industry?
Great. Thank you, Alex. I mean, I come from a technology background, as you mentioned earlier. I came to Silicon Valley about good 20 years back, and then I was part of two technology companies in the valley, good successful exits, and then as luck would have it, I mean, I got married to a doctor, and she transformed into medical research, and her first job was in that, and that's actually how I got interested in the subject. And I come from the data background, right? Master data management, mostly in the enterprise application space. But looking at clinical trials, I realized there's a lot of data play here, right? Data collected from various different patients across the world, and global clinical trials around maybe 50 country trials for 3 years. So there's a lot of data, right? How do we make good meaning of that data? How do we bring in a real-time analytics? Now AI and ML and a lot of the. I mean, we have all these technologies on our fingertips, right? So that's how I got interested. And I initially started by, just to understand this better, really enrolled as a healthy patient in some of her trials in downtown San Francisco, and was honestly a little amazed to see it's still quite, for lack of a better term, archaic, paper-based, manual, and the digital transformation, as we all talk about, it's there, but it's not really on the ground. Things are a little different. So that's how I kind of started getting more and more into it. And around the same time we started CleanOps. Good thing is FD also published a lot of guidelines to promote it. eSource was one of them, electronic source data, which is kind of the foundation of what we are all seeing in this pandemic right now. One is that source data, which is the first point of data entry, is digital. It's very difficult to do any of the downstream, in a nice and seamless and compliant way. So that's basically how we started. Fortunate to start initially with some of the top Ivy League academic institutions, and then started working with a lot of found global health foundations, and then eventually a lot of FDA studies, pharma, biotech, medical devices. And right now we are supporting trials in more than 25 plus countries globally.
This is really nice because basically you saw a very clear challenge that the industry had, and you focused on it, and basically you brought a lot of measurable value exactly in that direction. And this is like a real good way to bring value to the industry.
Yeah.
Um,
Alex, if you look at it, challenges are kind of different when you're talking about very high-end hospitals, like in developed countries, whereas not so developed health centers, let's say in Africa and Asia, and like I mentioned, around the world. And the way, for example, in a high-end hospital, a doctor goes in a round from bed to bed, room to room, patient to patient, floor to floor. And network settings are very stringent. They end up collecting all the data, source data in many places, and clipboards. So that has a different kind of challenge. If you go to an emerging world, many a time where the patient-doctor interaction happens, there isn't any internet. Right? We have a very different kind of a problem where data is collected on it. So we see various different types of challenges, right? So we understood all these, different ways of the challenges on the ground that the companies are facing, and then try to improvise, okay, what should be the right technology that is not going to be forced onto them, but aligns very well. So we came up with mobile technologies, came up with offline technologies and offline capture, online sync, and a lot of these quality data collection at source. How do we ensure that, right? Because at the end of the day, we all know, right, garbage in, garbage out. So if the source data is not right, then we have a lot of problems downstream, and which is exactly what's out there happening. So yeah, to your point, I got a good understanding of the landscape before we started writing the first line of code.
This is also something that we do a lot and believe in. Is one of our core principles when we come up with solutions for our pharma clients. The whole idea is to be able to tailor the actual technology on the human interaction, not to start the other way around. Because the best way to implement technology is when you don't feel it's there. So when you don't feel any technology, you've done a good job implementing it. Actually, that is the purpose, both at Infinite and within Stefanini Group, of course. I have one more question for Nagesh. What will the new normal look like for this industry, for the pharma industry? I mean, if you were to imagine this new normal which we are going towards, what will it look like?
Yeah, again, interesting question. As you see, many of the industries are going for remote work, digital automation. Likewise, in pharma industry as well, it will be increased remote work, more adoption of digital technologies, automation across functions. So let's take a case of clinical. Clinical trials will be more remote, decentralized trials. And then in manufacturing, there will be more automation, like AR, VR will be used for remote maintenance, more predictive automation, predictive maintenance remotely will be done. And then supply chain and delivery of healthcare will also be more patient-centric with more telemedicine, telehealth that you can see that is increasing. That is what I see would be the new normal for the life sciences pharma industry.
So basically, a lot of the trends simply started to accelerate a lot. Like they were forced to accelerate a lot, and some new trends appeared. Right? I mean,
Absolutely.
some of the things were already in the works, to put it this way. Like they were in different phases of adoption within our clients, and some things simply just appeared. Like on the
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting because it happens in different paces throughout many industries. But again, the most interesting thing about the pharma industry is the fact that it was one of the slowest to adopt technology, and we have to say that outright. I mean, this was a known fact. Um, I want to ask you something, Avik. Talk about this new normal. When do you think, in your opinion, when do you think we will see not a final form, but a more sedimented form of the pharma industry as a time frame?
Yeah, no, time will say. But again, before I answer that, Alex, if I may just pick up on the previous thread,
Yeah, of course, please.
to understand the impact of this, the pandemic, what it has done to the industry, 74% of the clinical trials are on hold. 74%. Right? That's not a small number. Now, how do we get this back, started back up again, right? One of the reasons I think, I mean, there are many reasons, of course. Technology adoption, and as you rightly mentioned, the pharma industry has been one of the slower ones to adopt, is also going to play a role, right? So the sooner we adopt these technologies, and as Nagesh mentioned, right, wearables, telemedicine, right, the continuous monitoring, medical device integrations, so remote monitoring. So all of these, the more and more technology adoption happens, the faster we'll get back to the new normal, right? What is that new normal? And I think remote is the new normal, right? I mean, the Zoom, the Meet, the Teams, Microsoft Teams, these are all part of our daily lives now, right? Not just us. I mean, our kids' lives as well. I mean, they are doing schools through those. So, and again, these technologies, it's not that they were not around before. They were all there. And it's not rocket science. It's that the adoption was not there in the mainstream, right? And so those are some of the things. I mean, the sooner we kind of get around it, the faster we will kind of get used to the new normal. See, why were these not part of the mainstream, right? They were all perceived as risky by this risk-averse industry. And now the same technologies are basically kind of coming forward as risk mitigation. Because unless you adopt these, you're not going to be able to get back to your business continuity, which is getting these trials back up.
So it's very funny because basically you would have an industry who would consider doing something a risk, and in the span of 1 to 3 months is considering not doing it a risk.
Exactly.
It's
exactly opposite.
It has really pushed the envelope for the pharma industry to its limit, right? And the good thing is, everybody is coming around together. And as Nagesh mentioned, FDA has also mentioned, I think, just a few days back, a very nice statement stating that the changes that the regulatory agencies are making for COVID are not just for COVID; they are here to stay, right? And he also mentioned that there will be some things that we are implementing from which we will learn which is not going to work or making it difficult. We will get them away. But the things that are working, we will keep them, right? So we are in for some significant changes, during and post-COVID, especially for this industry. I mean, the technology or e-clinical solutions primarily came around in the mid-90s. Right, UDCs and what we call about. It's been a good 25 years, right? It's time for disruption, and there are technologies on our fingertips now. Talk about mobile, the cloud, the AI, the ML, the devices, continuous monitoring. Everything. We can do all of that. It's just that it was never implemented that way, and we continued in the traditional way for a fair bit of time, but now they have really pushed the industry to get beyond its comfort zone in adopting these technologies.
This is actually very interesting because at the end of the day, and these are not new things, we are not reinventing the wheel here, but it's all about the actual corporate behavior. If some companies had a corporate behavior set in one way, that was the actual thing holding them from doing these advances. And the moment the corporate behavior changed because of this external factor, then some things rearranged. Therefore, their behavior is now more innovation driven. And
Yes.
Again, we see this as we say innovation, but it's an actual necessity. The adoption of the new technologies and new ways of getting the job done.
Yeah.
It's interesting. And to come back to the question, what do you think is the time span for us to see at least 80-90% of this new reality set in? How long do you think it will take? In your opinion, it's we're not oracle here, we don't have crystal balls. Okay, I have one, but the idea is, when do you think we'll see this?
Right. So, before I answer that, Alex, see, we have to understand what the baseline is, right? If you take the different stakeholders, patient, site, CROs, sponsors, right? The traditional model of doing was patient would come to the hospital, the site, and the CROs would work with the sponsors, coordinate with multiple different sites around the world to get the job done and give it to the sponsor and eventually to the regulatory. So all the patient is expected to come to the hospital for every single visit for all data collection. That has been the traditional model. Pre-COVID, that was 99%. And there were probably 1% of the trials which were done direct to patient, where you're using telemedicine to reach out directly to patient to collect the data and go straight to the sponsor, eliminating the other sites and CROs. Now CROs have come in to kind of partner with telemedicine companies and new age digital companies to provide those services, still eliminating the site. But I think that going from completely centralized trials, just 3 months back, to completely decentralized, right after COVID is not going to happen, right? So if the industry knowing the industry, psyche by now, and in terms of how, adaptive and how, risk averse and other things, if the industry gets into 50 to 60% of some component of decentralized or telemedicine components implemented in their trials for about in the next 3 to 5 years, I think that's a big move. given that 25 years it took from where we were to get to where we are now, to 50, 60%, 70%, closer to that much of. And I'm not talking about they will all be completely virtual. They will never. They will not. Right. What I'm saying is some component of virtual. So let's say if a trial requires 10 visits for each patient for that particular trial, can we do 3 of them on site and the rest remote? Can we do 5 of them on site? On site means at the hospital and the rest remote from home. Can we do 7, 8 of them on site? So that's the evolution I'm talking about. That gradually, the industry will make a conscious effort in drafting the protocol in a way where these remote data collection from home is given priority, and they will make a conscious decision. Okay, these 7 data points, 7 visits could be avoided at the hospital, and let's collect them from home, right? So it actually helps everybody, patients.
So a cool thing that we can share with everybody right here, right now in this discussion, is the trial from home trend that is now accelerated. It's something for our viewers to take in consideration. Also, some of these things that we are talking about apply on the marketing aspect as well, because now it's more and more important for the pharmaceutical companies not to just try to sell the product, but to add to the product a more and more empathic component. And that means finding the right moment to communicate about that product to the patient when the patient needs it, and build the education on the actual affection before the patient ever needs the product. Of course, I'm talking about the products that can be communicated: medical devices, OTCs, supplements, and so forth. I'm not talking about RXs. But also for RXs themselves, companies need to be more and more involved in creating educational content and tackling the affections, and being able to help the consumers and the caretakers where the case is, to help them more and more to get to the right information about the actual conditions, and to help them self-educate in a safer way. I think this is a huge responsibility that all the pharmaceutical companies have, and happily, we are seeing this more and more happening with our clients as well, and we have been doing this and helping them in all of these regards for many years. I have a question for Nagesh. As we talked about a bit earlier, pharma is was one of the slow industries to go digital. And the question, Nagesh, is if some organizations in the pharma industry haven't had embarked on digital transformation to this point, where should they start? How do they start?
Sure, great question. Companies need to start with the digital data first mindset and culture from top, and they can then build functional centers of excellence for digital data AI, because in pharma, data is the key asset for pharma. So everything strategy, digital transformation should be around data. And then pharma companies should build strong partner network with academia, startups, techs, and increase collaboration with payers, providers, and patients. More patient engagement, patient centricity that should be adopted. And start with the data strategy, align the data strategy with the business goals, functional business, and enterprise, the company's business goals and objectives. Create architect and roadmap aligned to the functions, be it drug discovery function or clinical or manufacturing function. Have data strategy, architecture, and roadmap aligned to that, and get risk and compliance should be also taken care of, and then get the control of proprietary data. There is a lot of value. Ensure that you have control across functions on your data, which is your key asset. So, and all your digital transformation should resolve and revolve around patients and patient care. So that's what I would recommend companies embarking on the digital transformation journey if they haven't done before.
So basically, we are talking about patient centricity more than ever.
Absolutely, yes.
And that has to be, at the end of the day, when you run a clinical trial, if there are no patients, we don't have data, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the whole intent is to bring a new drug to market that will help our patients, but to make sure that it is actually viable, we need to, we need patients to participate in these clinical trials. We need to make it easy for them. Right now, less than 5% of the population participates in clinical trials, right? And the ones they do, statistics says on an average they travel more than 2 hours each way, to get to the site. And then there's the sitting, waiting, da da da. And let's say the participant is a kid, the parent has to take off, right? The kid loses the classes. So it's not very easy the way the current model is. So we need to bring trials to the patient, not the other way around. Right? That patient centricity has to be there in the thinking, and that we need to design it the way so it make it easy for them. Right. So that's one aspect of it. I think the other aspect that Nagesh mentioned was the data, right? So we do these clinical trials. What is the end game? The end game is to have a drug. So we're all waiting actively for that magical drug that is going to cure coronavirus, and we'll all go back to Now that's the most tangible output, which is the vaccine or the drug or the medicine. What is the second most tangible output of this whole exercise? It's the data behind the drug. And if you run 100 trials, 99 of them fail. Only one, we get only one drug. But that 90% of the data that has failed is also very important. That gives us a lot of insight. Unfortunately, I don't think we are doing a good job in harnessing that data, learning from our failures, right? So that we can minimize the failures. Right? I mean, if we need to fail early, right? Because we have past data that gives us guidance and what has worked before, what has not worked before, and stuff like that. So that whole data strategy, how do we ensure that it is done right? Whether we collect data from home, whether we collect data from hospitals, how can we collect clean data right at the point of care? Right? That helps significantly downstream when we do the data analysis, when we do normalization, harmonization, the biostatistical analysis, and all of that. Unless we have clean data to begin with, there's a lot of effort that goes towards the end of the trial to just get the data right, data clean, data standardized before we can start with an analysis. So these are things to think in mind, that how can we do that right more upfront than downstream.
Yeah, and we have here a comment on Facebook from Madeline, who says that digital solutions helped a lot in the COVID crisis overall, because it was used a lot to identify and prevent the virus spread. And there are a lot of examples like South Korea in this aspect. So basically, we already saw, from being able to see centralized this data about the spread, to be able to centralize the information from all the countries, to visualize the threat. All of these things are proof that the technology was there when we needed it. So I think it's a very important statement in itself.
Yeah. I just wanted to add to that, Alex. I mean, the technology companies alone, can only go so far. I think we need a good partnership between the pharma company and the technology companies to come together, to work together, so that the technology company better understands the challenges of science, right? And the science, side of things better understands the value of data. So that's when the data science can really actually take the whole thing to the whole new level, where science and data can work hand in hand and bring much more value than individually each of these.
True.
Absolutely.
It's very true, and these are really valuable insights that you gentlemen have shared with our viewers. And I think it all paints basically a picture that not only we are already in a new reality. First, second, this new reality is defined and basically not limited, but uh, let's say open by technology, run by technology. So it's technology centric, it's dynamic, it's patient centric. So we always have the patient in the middle, and basically it kind of shifted the entire industry and forced it into an evolution, basically, if that is correct to say. So I wanted to ask both of you because before we finish our discussion. So first you Avik and then Nagesh. What would be like the key insight that you want to leave with our viewers after this discussion? So, what one key insight?
Yeah,
What
so
would
I
be?
think, yeah, I think we touched upon quite a few things, but I think as you rightly concluded towards the end that technology will play a big role, and that patient centricity is not going to be possible without technology in place. Right? We need to have data collection from home, medical device integrations, wearables. These have all started becoming part of everyday life, right? So adopting those in the mainstream, I think, would be key. It has not happened in the past, but I think let's learn from what we got ourselves into, and a lot of good things are happening. And let's learn from that and make that as mainstream, not just okay, COVID is done, we go back to
Mm.
old normal. That's going to be very devastating. So I think, fortunately, the regulatory bodies are supporting the adoption. They're seeing the value, and hopefully we'll get to this new normal, and mainstream adoption will start happening.
Thank you, Avik and Nagesh. What would be
Yeah,
the key insight you want to leave?
same. I resonate the thoughts that Avik mentioned. Not pharma companies, patients, payers, providers, partners, all should adopt digital and data technologies for better patient care and so forth. So that is what I would also give the insight. If more and more patients adopt to the digital latest remote, they participate in the trials, there will be good amount of diverse, good amount of data for, and also it will help in faster trials. And patient, if from their side also they are engaging with the pharmas and providers for trials, it will be more collaborative and faster effort, lower cost for lower cost ultimately for drugs and better patient care.
See, one thing is that the millennials are in the market now, right? So the adoption is relatively easier. So the patients are millennials, the doctors are millennials, the nurses, they've all graduated, and they are the ones, right? And they grew up in a different world. I mean, the home devices and Alexas of the world and other things, they're all part of their growing up, right? So, if we enable a more seamless way of interaction that they're already used to, that's going to be the key. So the legacy models, the old school models that worked for the last 25 years, it's not prudent to expect that they're going to work for this new millennial, the patients, the doctors, the nurses, and caregivers. So we need to make sure that the whole thing shifts towards that angle as well. That, we have different audiences running the show now, not the old school way of thinking. So
Very good insights, guys. I mean, really good things that I hope will be very useful for our viewers. So the conclusion, guys, is first, uh, the generation of patients changed, the generations of doctors changed, and now we need to have a new generation of pharma companies. And the new generation take, that will, let's say, slowly take place of the current one will be motivated by the patient care and helped by the technology. So these are the two things that put together will create the new generation of pharma companies. If I were to, let's say, summarize all the things we talked about, and the idea is also for me to add something. I think it's always been about courage, and I think if the reasons are the right ones, empathy, helping patients, helping people, easing their suffering, understanding them better and better, using all the tools you have available to focus on the quality of life of the people. All you need to do is be courageous about the tools, technologies, partners, integrators, everything that you build as an ecosystem as a pharma company to do that. If the motives are right, I think there is we, the three of us, and all the people we know, all the professionals in the pharmaceutical industry, we can't even imagine the lengths that this industry will go and the good that it will do. Motivated by the care for the people and powered by technology.
thank
So,
you very much.
gentlemen, thank you very much for joining this discussion. And I really appreciate the cool insights you have shared with us. And what can I say? Have a great day, because I think, Avik, now it's almost 5:30 in your city, 5:30 in the morning. And for you, yeah, Nagesh, for you is around
10:30.
10:30, and for me is 5:35 p.m. Yet again, one thing we really believe in, the world became closer, and it will
Yeah.
become closer and closer
Absolutely.
because of
Pleasure
technology.
here. Yeah, exciting discussion. Pleasure to have. Thank
Thank
you,
you very much,
Alex.
Agnes. Thank you, Avik. Bye bye,
Bye.
gentlemen. Bye bye,
Bye.
everybody. Thank you for watching us.
Good day. Bye.